Hello and welcome everybody back to another episode of Man on the Rocks. As always, I am your host Joe. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host Atlas.
Hello, hello.
This week, we got a bit of a different topic. We've talked about windows a lot on this show, and not the kind that you're gonna look through your house on, see who's creeping on you. No, the kind of windows in CDH where you need to know like when it's your time to shine, whether that's right or that's wrong, what that looks like, what that means for the table, for life, for everything, for you, for I'm not sure, but just come down, get a drink with us. Would you consider the window to be like a fundamental aspect of CDH?
I think it's probably, I don't know if it's necessarily fundamental. I think it's something you're like fundamentally aware of on some level whenever you start
Mm-hmm.
playing, but I don't know necessarily that it's like one of those core. It's not like core to one's understanding of the game. Like you can be a very good
Mm-hmm.
player and not be able to describe what the window is for a deck that you're
Gotcha.
playing.
But it's
I
okay.
think.
Okay. But like it's something that would you say like a more like seasoned player is able it's more like feel of the game, like flow, right?
Yeah, it's something like flow or just like that sixth
Mm-hmm.
sense that sort of like you develop the longer you've played. So more experienced players would be able to determine their windows better. Um, and then I think that sort of leads into being able to articulate your window and what that looks
Mm-hmm.
like, how to assess that sort of like is going to that's going to be another indicator of like a more veteran player or somebody who like thinks about the game a lot, who thinks about the different decks and styles of play and stuff like that. It's just that articulation is just sort of like next level. Like if you've been teaching somebody, you'll gain that
Mm-hmm.
extra little oomph. Because I think you can still be a very good player and not necessarily be able to articulate what the window is.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like it's an easy term to like just kind of like buzzword, you know? Just because I feel
For
like
sure.
it's very descriptive in what it does. Like this is like your window of opportunity. Like that's what window is short for, is window of opportunity.
Yeah.
Like this is your time that if you want to try and put, a win on the stacker, or like go for the win or make something happen, like here is your time frame that, is probably going to be your best bet, be it on assumption, reads, game knowledge, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think for sure. The big ones, the big identifiers that I hear thrown around a lot are like, oh, my opponents are tapped out, or if you talk with somebody who's playing like a turbolist or something, they'll talk about like trying to get in underneath the other like more mid-rangey or stack decks. A lot of times they're like, okay, my job is to go fast, so I'm gonna go fast. I'm gonna do trying to summon my win before anyone else can get there. And I think a lot of times that's probably like correct. But I think that the difference that you'll see between a really skilled player and um, like a player who knows a lot about a deck, like someone who's pioneered like a list or a style, and somebody who's like read a couple of primers, they've played some hours with the deck, is that the person who has put all of this time and energy into developing a strategy and a list, they've spent countless hours with like experiments and different brews and things like that of how to perfect their deck, is that person will be able to identify, okay, this is where my window is and this is what my window looks like in game one in 90% of games. But then those are also the people who will be able to say in the other like 5 or 10% of games or whatever that though it looks like my window is open, but I can tell from game sense or because like I'm looking at my board state and I can see like sort of generally what I'm up against, that it looks like my window's open, but it's not. I need to wait a little
Mm-hmm.
bit here. I need to like hang out. And I think that's most crucial when it comes to turbo players. Like that's a game sense that I think a lot of turbo players develop, that a lot of other people who play stacks, for example, are not going to hone in on as much, just because they don't need to. Stacks decks tend to win a little slower. They win with less pressure because they're the ones exerting pressure on other people's resources, on other people's time frames, and somebody who's playing turbo has to try and get in that like turn 1 to 3 like window. There's the term again. But the stacks player doesn't necessarily get that same repetition and the same experience.
Yeah, it's especially for like those slower staxier builds. You're waiting so long for your window to show up, or like the stars align, and you're able to just get there. I think like Rocco and Heliod specifically are really good at like potentially being able to play to that turbo style, where like sometimes you just have like enough stacks to throw the player off, and you have enough mana to like go Heliod Ballista activate on like turn 3, or like Rocco
Yeah,
lands like a Somberwald Sage or something, you know?
yeah, I think Rocco's a really good example of that, just because sometimes they are doing nothing other than going land dork stacks piece, land stacks piece, and
Just
they're
stacking it.
just
Yeah.
playing that really specific like grind game. And other times they come out of the gate swinging, where they're going, okay, well I can make 9 mana on turn 2. Let's go for it. And they look around, and they say, all right, yeah. Doesn't look like anyone's gonna have the interaction to stop like a Rocco or whatever, because everyone's tapped out. There's no player with double blue or something open. And you can like sort of like try and feel out maybe if somebody has a force of will, or maybe you have like one extra piece of interaction like a swat or something to stop a deadly relic or like a dismember or something later. And so you go for it, right? But I think the skilled players for that type of style, like they can pivot. If you're playing like a more turbo build of Rocco, you'll look for your window, but then also you'll be able to say, okay, it's not presenting itself, so instead I have to work on closing other people's windows, because I think that's a really distinctive aspect of the game as well, is being able to identify other players' windows and then work to close them, or as make them as tight as possible, as inconvenient for them to get to, so that maybe other players don't go for
Definitely. And I feel like that takes form in a lot of different shapes. I pull an example. This last week I was in a pod, and I was seat 3. Yeah, it was seat 3. The person to my immediate left and the person to their left were both set up to win on their turn. Essentially, like they had like pieces that they were representing, and I'm just like, well, I don't necessarily have like the greatest hand to go for, but like I have like a decent amount of stuff going on in my hand, and I've got Pact of Negation as backup. Like it's kind of either now or never. Um, those are like those definitely high pressure like windows are, they're such a gamble, because you know if you don't take the chance, you're probably never going to get that chance again. And
Yeah,
turns out
I
the
hate
oh god,
those.
they're awful. It turns out the player to my immediate left was sitting on 3 pieces of counter magic when I put them on maybe 1.5. And was like, well, it was never going to work out any other way anyway. So they ended up
Yeah,
stealing that game. Very very well deserved. Very good
bummer.
game. But yeah, no, like forcing your opponents to take those windows is always such a big gamble. And is really it, I feel like the best times to do is when you're sitting on like exactly like Pact of Negation and like Force of Will, just because you could
Yeah, I
just
can
because
see
you
that
can
for
do your
sure.
thing and then also still be able to represent, like I can still stop you on your turn, or like I can attempt to. Um,
Yeah.
and then almost on like the other end of the spectrum, you have things like Silence and Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain to a lesser degree, of just like not necessarily like pressuring your opponents, but more so forcing your window to happen when you choose it to, which is so huge, so huge.
Oh yes. My best friend is Grand Abolisher. Run that baby out there. He sticks. He sticks. If he doesn't, we'll try for it again later. We'll try and
It
stick him some
it
other
is
way,
it is an
reanimator or something.
on-site card with me. Like even if someone just goes like GA pass, I'm like, no, that this thing needs to fucking die. This cannot exist on the board. Like, because we are going to be complacent for like half a turn cycle, and then we'll just go, oh wait, we just spent all of our resources trying to stop you. You're passing into the Grand Abolisher player. We're boned, right?
Yeah, I can definitely. Sometimes the funny thing is like sometimes people like get really greedy too, and they'll just like they may see that you have a window, and they'll take a
Mm.
gamble. It's like maybe they have it, maybe they don't. Like that happened to me recently, as I threw exactly what we were talking about. Grand Abolisher onto the stack, trying to force a window, um, and two players have Ranger captains, but neither one ends up cracking it, and so I'm able to resolve the Grand Abolisher and then go for a protected win. And it's like to their minds, I was talking to them after the game. To their minds, one of them had a win on their turn, and the other one, uh, they said, "Well, you had 4 cards in hand. We need 3 of them, so it was a calculated risk that it was just Grand Abolisher pass." Because there was another stacks piece that was locking out my win, and I just happened to have the removal spell was the blank card in my hand, and so sometimes you just take the gamble. Like I know that if I crack my Ranger Captain here, I lose to the person to your left. So I have to really just hope that you don't have anything
Yeah,
right
and
now,
that's yeah.
because that's hard. It's really hard. It's one of those high pressure situations we were talking about, where it's like 2 people have wins lined up. You're like, how the hell do I stop this?
Yeah, I in politics, like that's where you kind of like make or break your own politics. There is like, depending on the situation, you either like you run your numbers, you take your gamble, and you try and go for it, or you like if you have something that can like stop someone, or like a stacks piece that no one was really like expecting, or like this like blowout card, that's when you kind of just at least to me, I try and pivot to the politic game as much as possible, and just like try and pit like the two players up against each other and be like, I'm just gonna pass with interaction. I'll remove the GA. I'll fight the silence. I'll fight whatever. But like, understand like we need to split our resources a little bit and try and just like pit everybody against each other.
Yeah, for sure. I think that politics can serve a huge they can serve as a huge resource in opening that window where you say, oh yeah, I'm gonna tutor for a response, and you tutor for a response, of course, because at least in this podcast we don't believe in lying to
Nope.
our opponents, mislead them, finagle or whatever, but don't outright lie. That's kind of scummy. um but yeah, so you tutor for your response, but maybe your response interacts with another player as well, or it serves a dual purpose with advancing your board state and responding to a threat or something like that. I think a prime example of that is like you hear, okay, I'm like everyone's like, oh yeah, I don't have any interaction. I don't have any interaction. Like passing priority, blah 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 blah.
What
Gets
a
to somebody
common
and they're
lie.
like, yeah. I'm not gonna. I'll pass priority. I'll pass priority. It's like maybe someone does have a counter spell, but you've been priority bullied, and now it's on you. And you're like, okay, guys, I do have a response, but it is an ad nauseum, and you're not going to like it. And everyone goes, ooh.
Yeah. Hmm.
um. So you're like, I can put this on the
I could.
stack, or I can wait, but I'm not gonna pass priority if we're gonna lose to XYZ's Thoracle, because I'll try and dig for an answer. But at the same time, I might also be trying to dig for a win at that point. So like it's really it's a hard, once again, it's a hard line to walk.
It definitely is. Like I I'm so often on the end of priority and bullying. It sucks. It's almost to the point. It's just like I have a bad habit of being like the first one to, like speak up on like when something happens on the table. That I just have to stop myself and just like out loud say I am last in priority. Like I will deal with whatever it is when priority is on me.
Uh,
As for like my contribution to the conversation, I am last in priority. Now, obviously, this switches when I'm trying to pressure people. uh,
of
well, yeah,
course.
obviously, because what I want to do the politics episode so bad, but like the little tidbit here is just be like, okay, just kind of like talking through, just like, okay, this is like what could happen. These are like potential lines, reasons for doing it, so on and so forth. If we have things, X, Y, Z is the best time to operate. And usually people go, okay, well, I think I might have something. And people don't look at me because I'm just like, I'm lost in priority. I'm just the guy just talking a lot right now.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something to keep in mind is like people always say your voice is a counterspell, but your voice can also just open
True.
windows. Like if you haven't, like, we talk about instant speed wins a lot, but if you have an instant speed win, you can get everyone to put their counter magic on the stack or whatever. You Okay, I'll cast my ad nauseam. I'll counterspell it. I'll counterspell your counterspell, and then player 3 jumps in. I'll counterspell your counterspell. All right, all resolves. And then it comes down to like play my like land or my other mana rock for turn or whatever. Pass, and you're like, okay, at the end step, instant speed win condition. And maybe they have another counterspell, maybe they don't. But that's one of those times where it's like I think a lot of decks, if they have an instant speed win, a lot of players can articulate, well, if there's been a huge counterspell war, a lot of players are tapped out, move to the end step. So that whoever's turn it is, they probably don't have a way to win at instant speed if they just attempted a sorcery speed win.
Or
Go for the
just
victory.
tried to
If
stop
it doesn't work
someone.
out, yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You continue the game plan. Just like don't overcommit. And I think that's a big part of it. Is like making sure not to overcommit to your windows, because it might not
No,
work out.
100%. That's definitely, yeah. No, being able to like work those windows and just like make sure the whole table understands like, hey, we can try and overcommit here. However, like the moment we overcommit is the moment someone else is gonna like that's gonna be someone else's window that we're opening. Like we're closing one window and we're opening another, like literally at the same time. So it's definitely one of
Oh
those
yeah.
things that I am always just like on like I'm like painfully aware of like we're putting too much into this. This isn't good. Like, oh no, you put like one piece of counter magic up, and then you're just like kind of sheepishly like not interacting with the window. It's just like, oh, so you just have the win in hand. Cool.
You're
Just
just
waiting.
waiting. You're waiting
And like
to see it happen.
I don't
Yeah.
blame people for doing that. That's the right thing to do.
Oh, for sure.
But that's when
I
you just
think
go, hey, this guy's trying to win as well on their turn. We need to pump the brakes here, team. Like you need to
it's
stop
like,
your win attempt because this like what's currently on the stack. Like I know you want to put the counter spell down, but the moment you do, we have to stop you. And the moment we stop you, you stop doing things, and then we let this person win.
yeah. And I think that is one of the hardest things to understand, even as a veteran CDH player. Is like just because you see a win line and you think there's like even a 50-50, 60-40 even will give you odds on that chance that you can win. Like you really have to weight the fact, like if someone is hard telegraphing they're going to attempt to win right after you, like hard telegraphing, pause, just reconsider for a second. It's just not, because it's not worth the potential that you get wiped out and lose the game because you ate everyone's counter magic for the
Yeah.
other person. You cast silence for them. Like, and I get a lot of input from other players, which, and it's valid, is the whole idea of, oh, make them
Oh,
have it.
true.
Oh, make them have XYZ. It's like, definitely. So there are certain times you want to make them have it, but also it is certainly worth talking with the table and considering your options first. And don't make them have it if somebody else is going to be able to try for the win right
Yeah.
afterwards. Like if somebody tutored for Thassa's Oracle and demonic consultation or whatever, or like they resolved, they worldly tutored for Thassa's Oracle, they demonic tutored like 2 turns ago, and now
Pretty
you're
good
trying to win.
chance that they're just sitting.
Yeah, there are
They're
odds
just
there.
sitting on it.
Yeah, they're waiting for their window, and if you're trying to win with like a polymorph or whatever, and the one opponent puts a counterspell in the stack, you put a counterspell in the stack, another opponent puts a counterspell in the stack, and now we're sitting there ready to get blown out by a Thoracle player, and somebody's like, okay, like even if you have the counterspell, wait, because I also have another counterspell. Like we're gonna stop you. We're gonna fight to stop you, or like somebody can like. That's the point where I'll be like pointing out stack pieces. Like, all right, you waste all this mana. Now you have to stop. Now you have to. Not only do you have to resolve your polymorph, which we're going to continue to fight over, but also there's this stacks piece and that stacks piece, or like this thing that's going to be of inconvenience for you. So like, don't forget that there's still a solid shot this won't work out, even if your spell resolves, because that Thoracle player hasn't even cast a spell yet. They might have counter magic.
This guy's got a
Like,
Mayhem Devil
they've
in the
just been
yard.
passing priority the
This
whole
guy's got a
time.
Mayhem Devil in the yard with a fetch land out, and your rogue rack is a 0/1. Like, did you account for that? Like, sure, we were fighting on the stack, but like the entire time, like Mayhem Devil's just like staring you in the face. Like, do you have something for this?
It's just one of those things where I think people can get really tunnel visioned when they see their windows, and that's one of my biggest gripes about playing with people, is when they do get so focused on, oh yeah, there's no shot that the table has 6 counter spells in hand that they could just cast. Because I have also been that player where it's like, oh yeah, I'll go for it, table's tapped out, safe to go for, and wall after wall after wall after wall, and you fight through it, and finally maybe you get stopped, maybe
You're
it
just
resolves,
barely.
but either way you aren't quite able to present a win, and now you have to pass, and the person to your left just, the table, the world is their oyster. Like,
Rakdos players in shambles. No, it's definitely like a skill thing, but I think at the end of the day, in those kind of scenarios, it's always going to be a gamble, though. It just like I don't know. There's so many times that I've like gone for it, and I'm like I fought through a lot of stuff, and then sometimes I make it out on the other end. I more often than not just get stopped, and then the next player just wins because I'm
yeah,
like, well, I have to use all of my like interaction as protection instead of interaction to like stop another player. It's
yeah,
it's a huge thing, and like the definitely the like make them have it adage is like it's a decent like tool in your box, right? Like I don't think it's always correct to just be like no, make them have it, make them have the counter spell. Like I think
yeah.
that works really well in 1v1 formats because
Oh, for
I
sure.
ever since I came to Magic, or I found Magic, and I found out about counter spells and like control strategy, I'm like, okay, cool. So you just try and cast two things on your turn, and or like cast an instant speed thing on their turn, and they either have it or they don't. Like it doesn't matter. Like the card's dead in your hand, may as well like try and progress the game forward in some capacity. Because at least in 1v1, play is way more fast, way more interactive in that degree. Whereas like CDH, there's so many X factors. Like it is X factor on X factor on
Yes.
X factor that like making someone just have it sometimes wins you the game. More often than not, will just make the other person win.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I'm not, I should clarify. I'm not opposed to the make them
Mhm.
have it strategy. I just think it gets employed too
Yes,
much. And I think that players who don't, I have seen players use it as like the cop out, back out line to um, overcommitting and not thinking about like the game as a whole as it's unfolding. Because like maybe we like for example, we knew that this player has Thorgal Consult in hand, but you just didn't stop to consider the fact that that might have been like that was going to occur after your win attempt. Like you just didn't you got excited or and you rushed or whatever, and it's like I was going to go for it now or never. This is my window. You said you had one counter spell and I had zero, but you could have been bluffing, so I was going to make you have it. It's like okay, but we also knew for a fact that this win was ready to go. So that's my
or
issue with the make them have it strategy is people just use it as a cop out. I think a lot of times.
like sometimes you just are like there is genuinely something that you forgot to like consider or calculate. I have
Sure.
many times.
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah,
Everyone does.
like
There's
the game. Did you know that Commander is very complicated, and playing it at a high level, a competitive level, is even more complicated?
there are
There are
so
so
many
many
things
things
to
to keep
keep
track
track
of.
of in any
It's
given
it's
game.
ridiculous. Like like
Yeah.
I'm really good at like always keeping track of dockside counts. Like at any given point, I am always figuring out everybody. I'm super cognizant of every dockside count. Um, but like sometimes I go for dockside. I'm like, oh right, I'm only making one here because I'm the one with artifacts on my field. Like there is a big number here. It's just my big number.
It's your
I'm the
mind.
wrong
Yeah.
number here.
Yeah. And I think yes, I would agree with that. I have nothing
No,
against that.
no,
I dislike it when people and I just get like it when people use that as a cop out
for sure.
as opposed to like you can acknowledge like oh yeah I got greedy or whatever. It's like sure that's fine whatever. But if you're saying oh I had to go for it here this was my only windows no there will be other windows.
Very rarely.
Very rarely are you playing in a game where you will only get
Yeah.
one window. Frequently um, frequently there will be two or three for each player depending on how long the game goes and like what's going on. I was playing a game last week where me and three other players were just being bodied locked out by a stack, and then at the 11th like we were all dead on board if the stacks player just kept swinging, and then at the 11th hour the stacks player they had it wasn't Sheldred, it was what was it? It's the Blood Chief's
Oh.
Ascension. Had three counters on it,
I know who
and
you're playing.
I got Peer into the Abyss. At the 11th hour, they targeted me because there was like Rule of Law, Curse Totem, Grafdigger's Cage, all these things. Like we were entirely locked down. I had taken 0 game actions, and I had the highest life total, and they just wanted me to discard for hand size and die.
Sick
Um,
play.
it's a cool play.
It's so
It just
risky.
happened that I had 3 mana and a legendary creature in play and drew into my Odawara. So I was able to Odoar the Cursed Totem and use that to use that to activate my creature to create a silence effect, and that was just activated abilities, and then I was able to had exactly enough mana to overload a Cyclonic Rift, clear the board, and get to a win. Which, to be fair, calculated risk. I don't know that I would personally ever peer someone else under any circumstances,
Unless I
but
literally have a shield grid and a
uh,
way to protect it, probably not. Even then,
yeah,
ugh.
yeah, I don't know. Like it's really risky. I don't know. They probably had a game plan. It just but whatever it was, this didn't work out. And it's like, and if they had just kept swinging, like we were dead. So all of our windows had been closed at
Mhm.
that point. But my window happened to open
Yeah.
up. So yeah, just really interesting how that happens.
Another thing that I think a lot of people like need to do more often, I make sure I do this, is like anytime like I think I can go for it and I get shut down, like just post mortem with the table. Like pretty much everyone that I play with and like will meet with, I'm like, if I have questions like, hey, did you have something here? Just like break down like those steps of the game, because that's the only way you're gonna learn.
Hmm.
Like if nothing else,
Yeah,
like if this is like a local shop that you go to like weekly, you learn, you get to conversate with someone else locally, you get to know a bit more about them, be able to understand them a bit more. Maybe it helps you out next time. You're going to build rapport with this person, to your benefit and to your disadvantage. But like even still, like understanding like, okay, was this the time to go for, like, definitively, like, okay, game's over, winner's been declared, we're all just shuffling up, like, hey, like what I just want to talk about, like, a couple instances in the game, like what were you thinking, what were you seeing, what were you calculating, what was in your hand, like I'm I want to learn. I want to know, and that's
definitely.
so huge. I feel like a lot of people are like, I don't even know, like, scared,
Scared.
afraid, like not willing to like be humble about it, or like whatever. It's just like, especially in the games that I lose, I always will want to ask people like, okay, like what happened here? Like
Yeah.
what I made a mistake somewhere along the line. Did you see where it was? How can what can I take from this game that I can use in the next game? I feel like a lot of the time people at pods just don't want to do that, and I'm just like, that's
They're
silly.
done.
They're
They're
done.
over
Yeah,
it.
they
They're
want to
moving
move
on.
on. And it's like, well,
I think it's a
it's a
great way to improve at the
it
game, though.
helps out so much because you see a lot of your own flaws in what other people are seeing. Same weekly tournament game one. I probably was gonna be able to win the game, but I made the mistake of casting Calamax when I needed to open up just a little bit more mana. I was playing against a Yuriko player, and I knew they had a mystical tutor. It was revealed off of a Yuriko, and we were like sub 20 life. So I'm like, okay, the next Yuriko trigger is the one we're gonna die at, or at least I'm gonna die at, because I had substantially less health than the other person in my pod. It was a 3-player game. Um, and like a bunch of my stuff had just gotten bounced. It didn't get psych rifted, but just a lot of my stuff was just returned to hand. And I was just like redeploying everything, and I'm like, do I play the Calamax here? I'm like, probably. It's a blocker. Like, there's value here in being able to like block a Yuriko or like an attacker or whatever. Turns out that was the wrong move, and I asked him afterwards, like, hey, did you like have any like other like interaction or counter magic? They're like, no. I just knew as soon as you tapped for Calamax, it was done. Like, you probably didn't have enough. I'm like, yeah, that's fair. I had to turn the earth in the yard to stop the mystical tutor, but I just whiffed it because I thought I was making
Yeah.
I thought I was making the right play when I was worrying about the wrong thing. My worry was correct. I just wasn't focused on the right thing.
I think that can definitely be um, one of the things that is fixed by doing those post-mortems, like you mentioned. Just breaking down, like, what did you see that I was or was not telegraphing? What was your thought process behind not cracking this
Mhm.
ranger captain, for example? And sometimes it's like you can see, oh yeah, that I mean, like, that makes solid
Yeah.
sense. Um, but then at the same time, sometimes someone's like, oh well, I was seeing this and it was not at all what you were thinking or considering, and it just had nothing to bear. But at the same time, you get an idea of how different players look
Mhm.
at the game, like what they're looking for, which is always useful because that can help you set up players to sort of like misdirect their attention later in future
Definitely,
matches.
definitely. It also like can help like not it helps prevent salt, I feel like, because at the very least, like, so many times I'll ask someone like, hey, why'd you do this, and they go, well, like, it like or like I'll get asked like, "Why did you do this?" I'm like, honestly, it was kind of a risk that I did it, but like I had reasons for risking it, and like just understand like, okay, everyone's taking risks with a lot of their things. Like you're not the only like you are not the only person making a risky play at the table. Chances are everyone's making a risky play at the table, especially like when the windows are starting to show up more frequently. Um, you're not the only one at the table trying to like weigh all these different options, and sometimes
Oh, for
and
sure.
like that is like just so huge and just like, oh, okay, no, that makes sense. Like I would also probably not crack my ranger captain in this case because I feel pretty solid in my position, or I know like this person has interaction, so I need to keep this as a backup for the following person. Like all of these different things to like calculate and track. Like everyone has a genuine reason for most of the things they're doing, or they just aren't paying attention, which is totally fair.
That does happen more than I would care to admit. I have lost my fair share of games because I just was not
Yeah,
paying
like
attention.
we're all human. Like this is a complicated game. Like it's gonna happen.
Oh yeah, there's like we said before, it's a lot
It's
to
a
keep
lot.
track of, and it's yeah, it's really hard.
You did. I know you said that like these weren't like the what you wanted for like the names. But you did list leading and waiting. Like what's there?
Oh, so leading, yeah, so we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think leading is a big part of forcing a
Mm-hmm.
window, because I think there are definitely game actions and things you can represent to sort of lead your opponents to presenting you a
Mm-hmm.
window, right? Whether that's a particular way that you tap against hyper attentive opponents, um, or maybe against players who are more concerned with with combat damage or something. It's like a specific attack you make. Perhaps it's bluffing someone out that you have a spell by leaving a bunch of like a counter spell by leaving a bunch of mana up, so they don't go for their win. And I think that those types of opportunities can be to win can be forced through different game actions. So I was calling that leading because you can sort of like lead your opponents to different conclusions to make, right? So one example would be um, if you tap a bloom tender for like I don't know, uh, blue, black, and green, and you spend black to cast a vampiric tutor removal spell, doesn't matter. But you have blue green left. Now your opponents are immediately can start thinking along the lines of, oh, well, maybe they have a neo form, maybe they have a this, maybe they have a that for these pips. When in reality, perhaps what you're actually sitting on is an abrupt decay for the stacks piece that's holding you back. And your opponents are not necessarily going to be thinking of that because you've tapped your bloom tender and spent your black ahead of time. Now you're not representing black green mana. It doesn't kick to the front of people's brains, and that's sort of like it's a heuristic that a lot of people aren't aware of. Is just like when we tap for mana, we immediately jump to the types of cards with those pips that we recognize. So if someone has it's that whole idea is if someone has two islands up, they're representing counterspell, or in our format, mana drain. um
Could still be counterspell.
so it could still be counterspell, but the idea there is that if somebody has two mana up and they just continually pass with two mana up and they're not doing anything, they're representing a counterspell. Now, whether or not they do have it or they are just trying to bluff you, that comes back around to that idea of like, we'll make them have it or try and play around it. But I think that's it. You can sort of like lead your opponents to those conclusions to force windows as well, as opposed to just try and stop them from taking windows. And so, certain one example that I can pull from in recent memory is if you I had a dockside extortionist make a couple of treasures, and I cracked them for like white, blue, and black or something like that. Um, uh, and basically what it boiled down to is I needed a green pip for this neo form, but I don't have any of that mana floating, so I was able to use I was able to use my black and my white floating mana to go cast a demonic tutor, and now just with a blue mana floating, it looks like I'm representing a counterspell or something. All right, my opponents are going to make me have a counterspell to defend it, sure. And they counter my spell, not thinking that it might be more advantageous for me to cast a Neoform that's in my hand because I don't have a green mana floating, right? And so sort of able to, and I post-mortem with the table afterwards, and my opponents even said, oh yeah, didn't put you on that because of the way you tapped your mana. So that was just an example from recent memory that of how like you can lead your opponents to those conclusions and sort of like force those
Mhm.
windows.
No, that's interesting because it's a different way of looking at the game than even I have considered. Just because it's a very different style of play, trying to like set your opponents up into those positions. It's definitely something that I have like slowly like unknowingly worked on. Especially playing Calamax, I leave a lot of mana open a lot of the time because I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, you're going to be sitting on a lot of counter spells, maybe instant speed draws. Like, okay, well, it will do something at instant speed when you tap out, and I just untap with like I untap like my one land that I used to cast a dork. I'm just not gonna tap out. You know,
Yeah.
and oftentimes I don't have anything to I never had anything to cast during the turn cycle, but I'm just like I might have a draw spell. I'm like, I can always cast it again next turn cycle. I'm not gonna tap out now, especially like if I'm fearing something happening. If I do, like
Oh
it's
yeah.
one of those
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, no, you can kind of like sniff out or sense those things.
It's an instant. Why would
Yeah,
you not do it
at
at
the
the
last
last
possible
possible
second,
second?
or like if you don't need to. Like I won't need to cast. Like most of the big draw spells. Like I don't cast them unless I feel like I need to cast them, or like I need to pull even further ahead. But even then, I could always cast it later on. Uh,
Yeah.
so many times I will just pass and just hold my hand and just like not touch my mana, and then goes to me. I go kind of pump fake with my lance. Go. I don't need to cast this. I'll untap. And I just see
Oh
everybody's
yeah.
face just go
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
uh.
Yeah, well that's definitely a type of leading where like you rearrange your lands and you're like do your mana math or whatever and you're like no, all right now. We're like I can't afford it just yet or
Yeah.
whatever. Whether or not you have anything to
Oh yeah.
do or maybe you can very much afford to do it, but it's just not the right
Mhm.
time. That's sort of like baiting people into thinking that you have
Oh
something.
yeah.
I think is really important, especially when you're trying to force those
And
windows
like
open.
that's like spillover like play patterns that I picked up just from playing a lot of 1v1. Like if I'm staring down like lethal on board, I will like my last draw that I'm gonna see, I'll take it and be like, that's a card. Sorry, I this changes a lot for me. And like I'll just tank for like 30 seconds. And I'm like doing my math, if I have creatures out, I'm like, like assigning I'm just like figuring out blockers. I'm like trying to run every calculation. And I look at it again, I go, oh wait, that's an instant. Okay, never mind. Pass the turn. Do your thing. It never works out except for the like once or twice it worked out that my opponent was just like, well, I believed you so hard. I'm just like, I had to, dude. I was staring down like all you need to do is go to combat, and I was just a scoop. You just didn't.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. Oh man,
it's so big. And it's something that I've definitely like tried to like work on myself. Just I think playing a lot of different decks, you will like pick up those patterns.
different
Diff-
tricks that
Different
different styles
tricks,
use.
different
Yeah.
styles, or at the very least, like you're gonna understand your opponent's position when they're playing those style of decks way more. If you want one or
Oh
turn
yeah.
to like a pet deck or a favorite brew or whatever, you're gonna understand how blue farm plays a little bit more, like how they would function in certain spots by playing a little bit of blue farm yourself.
Yep. Oh, for sure. I did want to touch on the whole idea of like tapping your lands or like tanking for a minute because that's the kind of stuff that I
It's
live
great. It's
for.
so good.
It's so good. I did hear one the other day. Haven't had a chance to try it in multiplayer yet, but I did hear one. I was playing some. I think it was either Pioneer or Modern, and I was playing some games and I was just chatting with my opponent, and we were talking about different ways that you can like lead your opponents, and we were talking about it, and we came to this one where he was telling me about a match he had with some guy, and he had a removal spell for against infect or something
Mhm.
like that, and the he needed the guy to like attack and kill him, and so that he could use the removal spell on the already pumped creature or in response to the pump spell, so it couldn't give a
Yeah.
shot or whatever. Infect plays some weird stuff, but um, anyways, so he looks at the guy and he goes, yeah, I'm at like 6 poison or whatever. You have it? And the guy's like, yeah. He's like, okay, let's see it. And the guy goes, all right, and just main phase casts his pump spell on his creature. And the guy's like, all right, that's fine. Move to combat. I'll kill your guy, and gets the game because of it.
Wow.
And just really,
Wow.
really funny. Best part of that story is I then immediately did that to him in our next game. Game
Wow.
two, we like just talked about this, and the guy it's like guy attacks, he's like, all right, you have it? He's like, yeah, attacks with his one creature instead of two, and I just like Odawara his Odawara his guy back to hand.
Wow. No, that's impressive. No, that's
It's
good.
a little disrespectful,
Definitely.
but yeah, that kind of stuff is really it doesn't work all the time, so you shouldn't count on it, but it is very much a tool that can be employed to
Oh, for
great
sure.
effect.
Or like one of my usual go-tos is like I just like finger tap count all my mana like out loud, just like while someone's like doing their thing, like someone will be like trying to like tutor or whatever, and I just go, okay, one, two for my soul ring, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I got 7. Okay, cool, 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 cool. I might have nothing. I might have everything. I also might just forget how much mana I have.
You'll
You'll never
never
know.
know.
Most of the time, it's I forget how much mana I have. But a lot of the times, I'll just be like, I need to do something here, but I don't want to take a game action. What can I do that can like subtly influence like this person's like thinking?
Sure.
This is
Yeah.
slowly morphing into the politics episode. Um,
Oh my gosh, yeah, that'll
it'll
be
be
fun.
great. Waiting, I think, is something that a lot of people have an issue with in CDH. People don't want to wait for their window to show up, even if it
This is a
this,
turn 2 and
this is
3
a
format.
turn. This is turn 3 format. I mean, come on. I think at this point, most people that are involved in CDH understand that like turn 3 is just is just like the turn like you need to be doing something. Like your game plan
Yes.
needs to be present on turn 3.
There was a discussion on the Reddit, I think just last week actually, about that. Somebody was asking, why do people say this is a turn 3 format or turn 2 format? Am I doing something wrong? Like what is going on here where all of my games are lasting much longer than like 1, 2, or 3 turns? I just don't see this other than like unless on the rare occasion someone has a god hand.
Which happens.
And even then there's like a counter spell
Yeah.
floating around. So and the consensus, which is very much correct in my opinion, is that turns 1 and 2 are just the turns that your deck needs to be doing something, like you said, by something relevant. Whether that is presenting a win, whether that is establishing a stacks piece that's relevant to the board, that's what you're. Those are the turns where everyone is setting up for the slugfest that is to come. And I think that it just gets really misrepresented by that whole turn 1, 2 format thing.
I mean, like I think every deck is pretty much capable of producing like a turn 1 like uninterrupted win, or like turn 2, turn 3 definitely uninterrupted win. Like I think most decks are constructed in such a way that like we have a lot of tools to be able to get that accomplished. But yeah,
Yeah.
I waiting is definitely a huge part of it. Like if you think you have your window sooner than you do, you're most likely not you're gonna run into a wall, not a window.
Just because you have land, Chrome Mox with a black pitch card on turn 2 does not mean you can go for Thorkel on turn 2.
Yeah, but even then, I think that gets into like the gamble of like make your opponents have it. Like this hand wants to go fast, but like you're also probably gonna get another opportunity. Like unless someone like wheels you, which I guess wheels are on the rise again. Like it's pretty unlikely that like those cards in your hand aren't not gonna be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Just I'm a very cautious
Hmm.
player. I don't like to take those risks. I tend to take my win attempts when I can get to like an 80% confirm with a Grand Abolisher or a Silence or something like that. Like unless I'm going for a protected win, I'm not usually going for a win. Exceptions being like those instant speed attempts
Oh
that you
yeah,
make after somebody else has put their win conditions on the stack and it's become painfully obvious that no one else
or
has anything. You're like, oh yes, So a silence has been cast. It just wasn't my silence.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, look, the only other white player at the table just cast their silence.
oh, do you have a counter spell? Because I don't, but I can cast this like instant speed dual caster mage
Yeah.
combo.
Or my favorite, and I use this one, is like, okay, I'm gonna try, like, I talked someone out of oppoing me with a Finale X2. And I was like, okay, you're courting right now. I need you to not get oppo unless you're pulling something to deal with like the tivit that's on the table, because I'm gonna try and find something that'll deal with the tivit. Granted, the thing I was gonna try and do was win the game. It still would deal with the tivit if I had my way. Like, tivit wouldn't be there.
True enough.
No, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, waiting is definitely an underutilized thing. I think a lot of people see like
Yeah,
Chrome Mox, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, just go, oh, fast mana, flashy. We got to go fast, and it's like, hey, you can,
yeah, I
but yeah,
no, I'll keep hands. I'll keep hands frequently. I mean, depending on the deck,
yeah.
obviously, but I'll keep hands that just like they bust out a ton of mana and like one mediocre engine, maybe like an Esper Sentinel or something, and then you just sit there and chill. You wait, you grind value with that Sentinel, or you don't if people are paying their taxes. But either way, like you've done something, you have resources, so that when somebody else makes their attempt to win or makes their casts their wheel or whatever to reset, like you're in a position to benefit from that. And I think it's a style of play that I think a lot of players don't attack from, which can be beneficial, can also be very detrimental at times, where everyone's trying to go fast and they're just refusing to wait. Um, you're able to benefit from that a lot by taking more patient style, so long as your opponents end up like checking each other and then you have a counterspell or two to stop them with. But I think it's also can be very hurtful to your own win percentages when everyone is trying to go fast and you're the only deck that's sitting back here going, okay guys,
Whoa,
whoa,
slow down there. God,
whoa.
they try and talk down like one turbo player when there's another turbo player just chomping at the bit. It's just like, hi, I'm talking to walls here, aren't I? Like, it doesn't matter what I say.
We just need a
Just
rule
need
of
a
law.
rule. We need something hard to like deal with this. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those are challenging situations to be in where you're fighting like two or even three decks that fight on the same axis, and you're like, guys, let's not attack on this axis, because if we do, then somebody's gonna end up getting stopped and it'll punt, and they're all like, yeah, but if it's the other guy who gets stopped, then it punts to me. You're like,
It's like
technically you are correct,
you just have
but
to go like, I hate that you're right, and I can't fight you on this. I'm just sad I'm not gonna get there.
yeah, basically.
Every time I'm in that
Like,
position, I just go, well, I guess this wasn't my game. Like, nothing more you can do in
yeah,
those situations. I feel like anything like more than that is just like you're getting salty over cardboard. Like, it's not. If it's
yeah.
not,
I
if it's
think
not
it's.
the cards,
I
it's
think
not the cards.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that there's like you can definitely like you can cry and
Yeah.
whine a little bit and be like, please guys, please try and make some headway there. But
At the end
yeah,
of the day,
don't
like, yeah,
sometimes it just can't happen.
the slugfest is gonna go in that direction, and unless you literally have every single perfect answer in the world and the follow up to capitalize on that, it's not gonna matter. Like we talked about
No.
control in an earlier episode. That's part of the reason why control has a hard time. Is like when everyone fights the same axis, you don't have infinite resources, but they probably have at least one more attempt than you have resources,
Yeah.
and that's all that
Yeah.
matters.
It's a hard
Yeah, I
knock
mean,
life.
that's the whole like attack defender thing. Like, defenders need to be perfect every time. Attacker, someone getting like it's a concept in IT of like blue team, red teaming, where the blue team, those that are like defending a network or computer system or whatever, like they have to be perfect every single time. Whereas the red team, the attackers, like they only need to get in once and they're in. Granted, there's another school of thought with like if you like breach a network, we'll say. Now you're playing to the home field advantage, and the home field is very, very set up most of the time. No, I like a lot of IT stuff, so it's definitely one of those things that's just like, all right, well, Alice, I see my window. think I'm gonna take it. I got nothing more here today.
Sounds good to me. I will not be counterspelling that attempt.
Hell yeah, win attempt resolves, baby. Chainer takes another one for the books. A bit of a shorter episode this week, but nonetheless, I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us for another episode of Man on the Rocks. I hope wherever this episode finds you in the world, you're doing well. We'll catch you next time.